Welcome to the DevReady Podcast, where we're helping non-techs build better tech. Today we have Rafael Kaluri joining us from NextContract. NextContract helps contractors find their next opportunity. Thanks for joining us, Raf.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
Now, Raf, let's dive in a little bit about your journey. Obviously, a founder of NextContract, but that's not where it all started. So tell us a bit about your history and background.
Okay, so I've obviously moved to Australia from another country. I originally came from India, so
Yes.
I do have Indian heritage. So I moved to Australia as a student, and I was about 19 years old when I came here, and that was about 21 years ago. So I came here predominantly to go through university and head back home again in a couple of years' time. So that was my kind of intent when I first came here. But obviously, once you come to Melbourne and you start understanding what Melbourne is about, you start knowing what, the people, you fall in love with this city very quickly.
It's a beautiful place. I think being born here, I'm very lucky. I don't even know how good it is sometimes.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, I made a decision to hang on and just stay here. And I now call Melbourne home. So I have, I met my wife here, I've got my children here. So it's essentially, this has become my home now. So that was about 20 years ago when I came here. I finished my education, went to a few different universities. And then I got into a corporate gig with one of the large organizations. I was doing really well with it was a junior role, but, you got to start somewhere. And that was my first entry into a large corporate. And that was in the early part of 2000s when I started. Yes. I started working for this particular company. I worked there about 3 years, and I got introduced to professional contracting by chance through a colleague of mine.
Okay.
And I was very nervous obviously I had a permanent job, and, at the same time I was having a young family. Mm-hmm. I was very nervous to jump into professional contracting because, you start looking at things differently when you start getting into professional contracting. But regardless, it's quite a rewarding opportunity to be a professional contractor in technology space.
Yes.
So I thought, there's nothing is lost. If I don't fare well, then I always had an opportunity to go and search for something more permanent and go down that path. I was willing to take that risk. So that's how I ended up being a professional contractor myself.
Oh, so you started doing this 17 years ago, basically.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. So it's been a long while.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No, very good. And what sort of, over the time, what sort of roles have you had during that process of professional contracting?
I've had a variety of roles, and that's probably one of the perks of professional contracting. I've had a variety of roles in a number of different organizations, and had the opportunity to experience and be exposed to different things that were happening across different organizations in various industries. So I've held roles from, being a business analyst and analyzing the businesses for various organizations, translating that into developing them as requirements, helping the businesses to validate and assure their products before they go into production. Mm-hmm. Help the businesses to accept change. So I've trained a number of business users.
How do you find accepting change in a corporate environment? It's an interesting one.
So, accepting change, I think, is it's a lot of hard work. It is a journey, and I think some organizations, make a mistake that if you introduce something that's cool and easy to use, people will start using it. But that's not generally the case. And as the change management as a profession, as it started to grow in Australia, I think people are now recognizing the value and understanding the importance of change management and helping the people through the journey. And now you see more and more organizations investing in that sort of capability. So regardless of, the products they introduce, be it tech or non-tech, they understand that there is a way as to how these products can be introduced and be accepted by the people who eventually will have to use it.
Have you seen that go hand in hand with sort of more of a focus on having the right culture, not just the culture you have?
True. some organizations accept change better than the other organizations.
Yep.
And if you dive, I mean, from my experience, if you dive deep enough, I think you'll see, the organizations that have been around for very long periods of time do struggle to accept change because the ways of working that they have and are accepted by themselves in the organization have been around for a long period of time. And when we try to do things differently, or when we try to challenge what has been socially accepted within that organization for a long time, it doesn't really sit well with a number of the people who will have to adopt new ways of doing things. And hence, we run into resistance. But there are some organizations which I've definitely observed have done it well, have been supportive, encouraging, and always showing people, the potential users as to why they should do things differently or why they should use this new platform. That is a journey in itself. I don't think it should be underestimated for any large organization. They should think about change management in at least 6 to 12 month increments, especially if they're introducing new technology products.
Yeah, it becomes difficult for them to pivot when they're set up and have structures for an existing model.
Absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I think that most of the processes, the operating models that are established in the organizations are based on the time, at a point in time when technology and other related processes were, I suppose, agreed at that point in time. And as those things evolve, the evolution should consider not just the technology evolution, but I think the evolution needs to consider more of the entire ecosystem in terms of how their models should change, how their processes should change, and how their people will be supported to be successful in what they do. So, and that's what we're experiencing now these days in most of the transformations where, it's not just a technology transformation. A transformation by definition is a transformation of, the whole organization, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It comes from the top down, doesn't it? So it can't just be a one man doing it in their corner or in a little division. I think it's a top down approach. And then from a transformational perspective, especially. So it is challenging at a corporate level, but when you get to a startup level, which is where you've gone to, it becomes a little bit easier to pivot and change, doesn't it?
Absolutely, I think so. I think that's where I was going. I mean, I think the newer organizations are definitely more willing and more willing to change and more willing to take risks, more willing to try different things because they've said they've got nothing to lose, and if it doesn't work, they will readapt and do things differently. And that's how I came up with NextContract as well. It's not like there aren't established platforms in Australia, but wanted to do things differently. And that's how, I ended up with NextContract or starting up NextContract.
Yeah, so what I always say is one of the biggest advantages of small business is the ability to pivot. And that we have that over corporate. Corporate can take 3 years to do something, and that can be done 10 times over in a smaller, more nimble organization. So if you're sitting back and have an idea or in a smallish type organization, that's your opportunity. Being small is definitely an opportunity when you're innovating.
Yeah, I think so too. Fully agree with that. I think being small gives you that ability to flex and adapt to changing external and internal conditions very easily compared to a corporate, in which it will be a lot more expensive. Generally, it's a lot more bureaucratic, and the decision making is also dependent upon multiple parties agreeing to it, and that all takes time. And time is effort, and effort is money. So
yeah, definitely. So as you're throughout the journey of working as a contractor over this time, what are some of the positives that you found working as a contractor? Obviously, the diversity of different challenges and different roles and different organizations. What drew you to that at the time? You mentioned you were somewhat reluctant, but what drew you into that approach of working?
So contracting, I've been contracting mainly in project space. And what I mean by project space, it has, we all understand what projects are. They're obviously there is a start date and end date, and there is a particular amount of time in which the project runs, and there is a definite objective that needs to be achieved. And once that objective is achieved, we shut the project down, and then everybody moves on. So I started working in that sort of setting, and my mindset was very much, okay, what is the objective that we need to achieve in next 6, 12, 18 months? And then once we achieve that objective, you're satisfied in terms of what you have achieved, and then you look for the next challenge. So that was a mindset change for me.
Mhm.
And so that's, after I entered into contracting, I started to appreciate that sort of thinking a lot more because I could see that I was delivering value across different organizations in short bursts. And then I had an option to choose a different challenge in a different organization as soon as the current one finishes. So that's one of the key positives. So apart from, your exposure and experience across multiple organizations, you have options, that generally working as a permanent employee in a particular organization, you may not necessarily get. Now, so going back to your question, what are some of the positives of contracting? Definitely exposure and being able to connect with a multitude of stakeholders across different organizations is an asset for a period of time. And, if you imagine spending about 10, 15 years working across 15 different organizations, the networks that you develop are huge. And you can utilize those networks for various things that you may choose to do. And I see that as a positive. So for me, I connected with so many different people across so many different organizations, and I'm connected with them now. And and it is a very small world, and you bump into them all the time. So
Definitely, I can imagine.
yeah.
Oh, and networks are so important,
Yeah.
especially for our future success and future opportunities. Having network and the ability to access network and resources and run ideas past different people is important for everybody. So I think that's a massive advantage that, yes, I didn't ever think about when it comes to contracting, but building a network of different people and capability would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then from the other side of it, so what are some of the challenges of being a contractor, and how do you handle those challenges over those years? What have you done?
I have been fortunate to some degree, I must say.
Okay.
So, why I say I've been fortunate is that, I've been contracting. If I take my first 3 years off where I worked as a permanent employee, I've been contracting for the remaining time. It's nearly about 14 years. I've not had one day without a contract in my entire history.
Oh, wow. You must be doing something decent.
So I did, I did reflect in terms of, what went right for me. And I collected some thoughts. I also spent some time with some of the other people who were also in a similar boat as me. And, I think I kind of ended up with about 10 different things that, potentially you could do to increase the success of being a contractor.
What are these 10 different things? Because I think it'd be interesting for people listening that want to go down this path, and then we'll talk into what you've done with the platform itself.
Sure, absolutely. Let me talk about that in a minute. So I think contracting, going down the path of contracting, requires you to be absolutely confident about yourself, confident that you're able to do the job, whatever the job may be. It may be working as a business analyst or test analyst, project manager, program manager. I kind of see being a CEO is a contract gig, to be honest. You generally tend to be a CEO for a few years and, probably 3-5 years, and then you move on. So confidence in self it's an absolute must. And I think taking accountability for your own actions and for your own doings, it is not a permanent job. So the mindset that the employer has when they hire a particular contractor is because they hire them to start and hit the ground running as soon as they're on board. Whereas if you're a permanent employee, you generally get some confidence built into you. You've been trained to do certain things certain way. And even if you didn't do things very well, they generally are accepting of those things and they train you to do it. Whereas as a contractor, I think you may not necessarily have that advantage. They expect you to come and they expect you to perform. So I tend to say that when you're a contractor, you're essentially running a business. So you have to start acting like one. And you must, I think that you should act like a corporation of one man, two man, whatever they may be, right?
But it sounds like it, because you're selling yourself into a contract. You're delivering an outcome, and then you have to sell yourself in the next outcome. And I think It does sound like you're running a business of one, whatever it may be. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we see large consulting companies that are doing, and this is no different. So you're selling your capability and your ability to deliver something within a particular period of time. So you need to act like one. So I think that you should act like a corporation. You need to have unparalleled focus on your personal growth and profitability. And profitability is important because for you, you may have a contract now. In 6 months' time, you finish the job. You may or may not have one right away.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
Yeah, could be something for a period of time. So you need to be profitable, not just make an income.
Right. Now, I touched early on saying that it is a small market, and it is so the brand that you are your own brand, and you have to build that, and you have to build that with purpose and a vision. So when people talk about you, they know what they're talking about, or at least people who know you know what you're all about. So and you've got to build a positive brand and associate your name to that brand. So again, it's going back to thinking about it as a corporation and what you bring, what values you hold high, and what your morals are, or what your ethics are, both from work perspective as well as personal, your own personal motives in terms of what you want to achieve. I think branding is very, very important, and you have to continue to brand yourself, and people will remember you. They'll remember you for 5-10 years. So that's another aspect. And then obviously running any business, there's going to be ups and downs. So you can't lose confidence when there are some downs. So especially if there is a downtime between a contract to contract, you just say, okay, that's how the business is run, and you should prepare for it. So, if you are going to be deeply disappointed when there is down, then perhaps contracting is not necessarily not for you. So
it's not going to be a complete sequential job to job to job.
Yes, well, that's what we hope to, but sometimes it will not be the case, and that's okay. And you have to just accept it. When you accept it, it's a lot easier to deal with it.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, and then unless you want to run with a model of the higher remuneration for your contract period covers off two lots effectively, and you can have a holiday in between if you want to, depending how you want to approach it.
How do you want to approach the model? Correct.
Yeah, true. And a lot of people do that. They only do contract for a short period of time. They take a break and come back and do other things.
Yes.
So again, that's one of the advantages of being a contractor. So, and this probably is very, very important. We touched on this as well, which is you have to relentlessly build networks. And I can assure you that my last 6 contracts have been through networks.
Yeah, not for a job site, I would imagine.
No.
Yes.
So I think networks run deeper, and it's a lot faster rather than going and applying for a job. And especially when you start proving yourself in an industry and people recognize it. And if you're doing a good job, they generally want you back.
Of course.
There's no reason why they want to replace you. If you're doing...
If you tried and tested like anything, it's much easier to bring you into another project that's happening in 12 months' time. It makes sense, right?
That's right. And the other, I think we're up to 7 things, which is you obviously have to be good at what you do.
Yes.
Right? You have to be better than average. You can't think like, well, I'll give it, I'll do what I think is best. But, you really have to be good at what you have to offer. And people need to see it. And you need to show that to them when you do get that opportunity. And that will, that will go a long way, because that also ends up being your reference for the next contract.
Yes, that's very true.
So, and that's how you take control of your own growth. And and then you just don't expect other people to come and tell you need to do these things for you to go further. You start thinking for yourself in terms of, okay, what is that I can do to go further?
It's a very proactive role. So you're a business owner. You're not just an employee. You have to take that hat off and move on.
That's right.
Yeah, get it.
Yeah. So then obviously, manage all the stakeholders across different organizations, stay in touch with them, be authentic in your relationships. I may have left some organizations 5-6 years ago, but people that I've worked with there, some people are still there, and I'm connected to them. When an opportunity arises, I do say hello to them. I do talk to them. It is predominantly being in the know and keeping those relationships open, because as I said, networks help you get your next opportunity very easily, and keeping the network active is an important part of it. You've got to be very organized. So you are one man who's trying to do everything.
Yes.
So it requires you, organizational skills to be really up to scratch. And then when you achieve success, you celebrate and go for the next one. They're my 10 things, I think.
Yeah, very good. I think there's some really good learning in the people that want to go down this path, but there's good learning for anybody that wants to move forward in any role, any responsibility, whatever it might be, because they're good principles for anybody to move forward and grow with. So I think that you can tell the type of personality that you are based off that and the learning you've had over the years. And obviously why we're talking today is NextContract, and NextContract's obviously come about because you've been working in the space for a long time. And now we're talking directly to a domain expert in the contract space. So you know it well, you know how it works, you understand the ins and outs, applying for roles, what the challenges might be, and talking to anyone out there listening. Raf is obviously more of a technical guy, but he has applied the same principles. It's about knowing and understanding and finding problems within the space that you can actually solve. So, Raf, what are some of the challenges with applying for jobs and getting new roles that you've found? And what are some of the redundancies that you're trying to take out with NextContract?
So when I reflected in terms of what helped me be successful, they're the 10 things that I came up with. And then I started thinking about, okay, how can I implement these 10 things into some sort of a platform and make it available to anybody who wants to go down this path, right? So that came to my mind, and I said, okay, let me think about how can I help people get their next contracts. Let me take another stab at this. So the 10 things that I've talked about, I wanted to convert them into a platform so that anybody can access these 10 things and make it really easy for anybody to achieve or to go about doing these 10 things. So that's how I built NextContract platform. It is built predominantly for a contractor or a professional contractor who enjoys the freedom of going between the organizations for short periods of time and who enjoys being rewarded for the effort that they put in a particular organization, generally a bit more than a permanent employee. So NextContract, if you think, so was built predominantly for the professional contractors by applying these 10 principles. So some of I do want to talk to you about how it helps them. The first thing, in my own experience, when I went to apply for jobs, I go to your standard known platforms, you apply for a job, and sometimes you get a response if you're lucky, sometimes you don't, and you never hear from either the recruiter or employer. It's you applied and it's gone. So
disappears. It's the ether.
Yes. And you can talk to anybody and they'll tell you, right? They'll tell you, I applied for 100 jobs, and in some cases that I've got a response back, and in some cases it's just disappeared in the ether. So we said, okay, I don't think it should be the case. It should be, when you apply for a job, there is a lot of effort that you put into it. So I think you do expect a response back from whoever you send the application to. So in NextContract, you can basically see all the applications that you have made, and you can see in real time the status of where your application is. So that's one of the things that we've done. Now, as a contractor, there's some things that you do which you generally don't do if you're a permanent employee that often. For example, when I move, as a typical contractor, you move anywhere between 12 to 18 months between organizations. So, and sometimes it can be even shorter. So every 6 months, you sometimes end up moving. I've seen some people look at this as a negative thing because, there are traditional mindset where people think that if you're moving between the organizations every 12 months, it's a bad thing. But I don't believe so. I think if the project was only going for 12 months, someone has been placed in that project for 12 months and then they finish the job. And then now it's time to move on. If they find the opportunity within the organization, that's fine. If they don't, that's okay. You should be able to move to another organization. So there are two schools of thoughts about that in the industry. But in my perspective, it's okay to move between the organizations. And if you finish the project and if you've done your work and you can prove that through assurance from somebody you either reported into or you work with, then that's okay.
It just gave me a big picture of your resume, Raf. I imagine there's like 30 or 20 organizations sitting on a ridiculous amount of roles. Yeah. I get why people might be concerned about that. But if you're applying for it, you're not applying for a job technically, you're applying for a contract. So it's a little bit, it's very different and it's a different mindset. So
you're applying for to deliver an outcome.
Yes.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So you would act similar to what we do in our business, which is a contract to deliver a project or a development project, and the outcome is delivered, and then the contract's paid through that process. Now, that's generally what you're doing, just at an individual level in a part of the project.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely right. So, so we made it easy on NextContract, and so I wanted to create NextContract platform primarily to bring about that focus for contractors. There are other platforms where, there's plenty of jobs that are advertised and people go there, apply, and, some of them find the jobs and they move on. But NextContract platform, as you can see, thinking about contracting is different. It's not the same as your permanent employment, right? So that's the other thing I talked about on the platform is, as we jump around between the organizations, maybe I shouldn't use the word jump around, as we move around between the organizations, hop from it's there are a number of things that you have to do, such as you have to do the police checks, you have to do reference checks, you have to do immigration checks where appropriate. Sometimes you have to do baseline security checks, sometimes you have to do working with children checks, and you have to do these things all the time. So if you imagine a permanent employee who's been in an organization, they probably do it once, right? And they probably end up being there for 5-10 years. And then if they do move at a 5-year mark or a 10-year mark, they have to do it again. So it's not a big deal. Whereas for a professional contractor who moves between organizations anywhere from 6 months to 18 months, they have to do this again and again.
Yeah, so it's a repetitive process, basically.
It's a repetitive process. So it's important that, I've done them. And over the years, I've done them so many times. I've never actually, seen what they are. I go and fill up a whole bunch of data on some platform that the employer asked me to do. I fill it up, and employer gets that information. I don't get them. I don't know what it is, right? And then I get an outcome. They say, okay, you can start on this day. We've done all the checks. What do you mean you've done all the checks? I want to know what those outcomes are, right? So I think that if you're going to talk about me, of any individual, the individual is, by definition, has the right to see what that information is.
You would imagine, yes.
So, we created that platform where, you can do all these checks. And when you do these checks, we've automated such that the employer gets them, but also the professional contractor always has access to their documents.
Okay. Yes, so you're solving that problem. So basically, you don't have to repeat potentially, because you could hand them forward to the next contract. Get that?
Correct.
Makes sense.
The organizing is another key aspect. Yes. Now, if you think about contracting, and even if you think about DevReady as a business, you generally have your PI insurances, your PL insurances, you have your work cover, currency certificates. All of these apply to individual contractors as well. And, all these documents, and I, very early on in my career, I could never find these documents in one place. And every time I need it, I say, oh, God, I got to look for these things in different places. And it used to take me a couple of days to organize everything. So we made it easy on the platform.
One of your tips, Raf, was you have to be very organized.
Very organized, yes.
He learned from that.
Yes, putting the platform one place. Very clever.
Yeah. So, and we've not only just put them there, it's really, really easy for them to share this information with others.
Yeah, very good. So there's obviously a bit in this platform around helping, sharing, applying for jobs, keeping information in one place. This conversation I find very interesting because when we have this conversation, you're obviously a technical person to some capacity, project management, etc. You get into detail. Now, just people are listening out there that are non-technical, this is all the detail that needs to go into an application when you're thinking about it. So at a high level, yes, Raf's trying to deliver an outcome to make the life easier for a contractor to get their next contract, but there's all the little details that come into this. So Raf, when you go about designing or thinking about a platform, just not even NextContract, about thinking about a platform, what are the steps that you take in place to dig in and get an understanding of what the user really needs?
It's a very interesting question. I'm happy to talk about how I generally think about this. I don't know who said this, but somebody, I was working with somebody and they mentioned that we spend 3 years in planning and 1 year in building.
So a lot of planning goes up front. I would say that I think if you're building a major platform, obviously I'm not going to talk about the finances, especially if you're an individual investor, etc. Let's put that aside. I think there's many podcasts out there which talk about how you can go about that. But just in terms of the platform itself, a lot of planning goes in, and from my experience going through about NextContract is spending a lot of time with the users upfront is, I think, is mandatory, to be honest. Speak to as many users as possible. You based on your experiences, you may have a particular hypothesis to all of these experiences that you're going to provide to users.
Hypothesis. That's what it is. It's what you imagine might work, and you need to test that, and not with a platform. Generally, that's where people get a little bit lost, I think.
That's right. I think the bigger the sample is better, but again, you don't have to go overboard. So you make a determination in terms of what the sample size should be. Shouldn't be, doesn't have to be too small, doesn't have to be too big, but as long as you get multitude of views in terms that you can incorporate into your designs, I think that is probably the right thing to do. And but when I started thinking about platform, I came out with something like like 200 features that I wanted to put into the platform. Right. And then I think at the end, we ended up probably about 25 to 30.
25 to 30. So what happened between 200 and 25 to 30? Explain.
Big drop.
So, it is. I think, when you're doing a brainstorm, you come up with a whole bunch of crazy things. That,
you do.
And then you go through a process of elimination. And I think as you go through and test each of those features and your thought process with the individual users, that'll help you to eliminate some of these things. I can't quote the research, but I think I've recently seen a research somewhere where they said that, a number of platforms that are built and nearly 60% of those features don't ever get used.
It's something like that. It could be more. I think 80%. If you look at the 80-20 rule, generally that's where it lands, and that's where you are, really. You're in the 10, 15 percentile of what you actually built. So it's interesting.
Yeah. So I think, spend a lot of time up front and design until you think that that's the right design. I mean, user experience is everything, and for platforms like us, for NextContract, we probably get one shot at showcasing our platform to users, and the users don't like it, they're not coming back. And it's really, really hard to convert someone who's given up on using a particular platform to come back to the platform again.
It can be difficult, definitely. So, and that's and you're technically a marketplace. You've got two types of users, and there's two different types of thinking there as well. So you have to design for both sides. So there's the business and the contractors. So there are two components that you need to think about and put yourself in the heads of those people and query and survey each of those people, not just one or the other.
That's right.
Or yourself. Yeah.
So, I mean, we looked at, obviously we can, it's advisable that you do research on a number of the businesses that exist at the moment. Like, for example, Airbnb, we did look at, what they're doing, because they did have, they do have two types of people. You've got the vendors and you've got the customers who want to use the properties, right? So, I mean, looking and learning from existing platforms definitely helped us in terms of how we want to design. And what we've really, released into the market is MVP. So it is our basic product that is at the moment doing, that can solve a number of problems, but we are building on top of this quite significantly and rapidly. And predominantly we have only one vision, it is to ensure that contractors are employed and they're able to go between the contracts with little or no downtime between contracts. That is our ultimate goal.
So MVP,
try and maximize their time.
Yes.
What does an MVP mean to you, Raf? So why do you release an MVP?
So for me, it's MVP, as we all know, it's
as most of us know, it's a minimum viable product. So it's a product that can at a basic level do the job it is designed for. It still doesn't have, it still can be enhanced through a number of features. If you call it as, I wouldn't call it as bells and whistles, because I think bells and whistles paints a different picture. I think MVPs,
So you build bells and whistles for years and add no value, basically.
Add no value, that's right. So MVP to me is a minimum viable product that will actually do the job and nothing more.
Yeah, okay.
But it does does the job end to end, and whatever that end to end may be in a different scenario. But in our scenario, it is a contractor can search for a job, can apply for a job, can see when the status of the application anytime. They can refer those jobs, and for their referrals, we reward them. They can track those rewards. They can store all their documents and share the documents with the employees on need basis. They can complete their reference checks online, and all of this on one platform. It's all integrated to the employer.
So it is a chunk of development still within that MVP, because it is aiming to complete from end to end.
Yes, if you frame MVP as minimum value product, what's the minimum thing you can deliver that will give value to the users, not the minimum viable.
Anything viable can be a bit challenging, like viable to your pockets. For example, if I've got a 50K budget, it might be viable for me to build something for 50K, but is that valuable to our users? So I think, the minimum valuable product makes more sense to me too.
That phrase is a better one, because at least then you're focusing on the outcome like you're doing to provide an end-to-end solution to both customers. Rather than just getting something to the market that'll get one side on board, which would be viable enough to get you some placement, but not really deliver the value that you need.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I have to agree with that. Yeah, so I think it is, I've always looked at it as minimum viable, but in my mind, viable, I suppose the way I was defining is something that is able to provide a function end to end. If it doesn't, then it is it's neither of value nor viable.
Yeah, it can take two meanings. Come up with the value part. I think we found that.
But most people say viable as the MVP when they mean that. But it's good to reframe it the other way, because then you have the right focus.
I've also heard minimum lovable product along my journey, and that's an interesting way to think about it too. So it then puts it in the minds of what's the user going to love using, and it's a very different way to think about it too. So there's a bit of different ways to just rethink and reframe the way minimum viable is.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in terms of building a tech product, how did you approach it? What did you do? Did you have some challenges along the way, or did you pretty much get it right from the get-go?
I mean, I've been managing. Obviously working as a contractor, I've been a project manager, program manager, managing programs and projects which are quite large in essence. So I was lucky to have had exposure in terms of how I have to plan and go about building this. And I suppose I had some insight into some of the pitfalls that I need to watch for as I go through this development. So one of the key challenges is, building the product and accessing the right set of organizations who can help you build the product is a key consideration. And especially if you're an individual investor who's building a platform, obviously cost is the single most biggest factor that you need to consider before you can go down the journey. So I did some high-level estimates in terms of how much something like this is going to cost. I received or reached out to a number of organizations to ask for quotes, and I shared my ideas with them. One of the classic organization, I reached out to another startup who's actually helping build platforms like this to local organizations, and I found it was interesting when I reached out and asked them, I'm trying to build something like this. This is my idea. Do you know how much it will cost to build a platform like this? And they came back and said, well, I think it's best that you speak to other organizations to determine how much something like this is going to cost. And if you think that you're funded, then we are happy to consider to take it further.
That's an interesting response. Okay. Then.
I know. Yeah.
Obviously, not interested in working with you.
Correct. Yeah. Well,
Yeah. That did, it did end up staying in my mind. I thought, why would you say that?
Yeah, it's a weird way to respond.
It's going to be, Yes. So I did my research. I reached out, and we got to think global these days. We can't just think local. So I reached out to companies offshore as well to get some quotes. I interviewed about 4 different organizations to determine the right team that can work with me.
Now, let's answer that question. What process did you go through there? Because you've obviously got the expertise to potentially do this.
Yeah.
So what process did you go through to interview and question potential businesses that you could engage with?
I suppose that, if you engage an organization, in my professional side of things, I engage organizations, generally the large ones, and we hold them to, we engage them for various things, and we kind of go through a evaluation process that will tease out the outcomes that we can achieve in the most efficient manner at the lowest cost. And we ask questions around their methodology, their processes that they use, and any case studies that they can provide to prove that they've done that somewhere else. So I've very much so utilized the same set of thinking in a smaller scale with the smaller organizations to determine if they've done something like this. And there were some of the key things that were very important to me obviously the design side of things, the way of working, ability to respond quickly, and to show urgency to take to market. They were the key things that that were important to me when I started off with the platform, and they were the questions that I came up with and queried the vendors. And obviously, cost was also another key factor to come to a conclusion in terms of who you pick a partner to build with.
Yeah. So. Cost is one thing, but it's also finding the right partner. So sometimes you might, they might be cheaper, but based on your methodology and questioning, they probably don't fit the bill. So it's an important thing to just dig through. Yeah. When you went to these organizations, what did you have in place? I like to ask this question because when people out there are listening, sometimes they might just have an idea on the back of a napkin and expect to get some sort of figures and costs around what this is going to cost to build. So what did you have in place before you started approaching some businesses?
I had my vision in my head, which I had translated that onto a paper.
Yes.
I had I suppose I had pretty good understanding of the problem that I was trying to solve. And then I had a brain dump of things that I wanted to put on this platform. It's just a brain dump, so it was a rough sketch.
Yeah.
And what I did do though is that when I engaged these people, I've sent these, I think it ended up being about 3 or 4 pages. I sent these 4 pages to various organizations and asked them to spend some time and reflect on it before we meet.
Yes.
Because I wanted them to also understand what I'm trying to do, and I, obviously that gives me assurance that when I do meet with them, whether they're the right partners or not, I wanted to test that out. So essentially, I had 5 pages of my idea and ability to talk about each of those points clearly, so that they can understand from their perspective in terms of what they have to do.
Yeah, get it. So you've actually documented out here's the key pivotal things that the system needs. Now, in terms of methodology, you mentioned obviously design's important. What approach was important to you when you walk into a business? Was it, all right, let's design this thing up front? What did you think through, obviously, if that was important to you?
So with the design, so once the concept was understood by the selected partner, we went through undertaking a number of process flows for all the different types of use cases that exist on the platform. And once we were satisfied with those process flows, we kind of did a bit of paper sketching. And I validated those paper sketches with some of the potential users here.
Nice. So you're validating early. That's a good tip for anyone out there that's listening. Validate with paper sketch, like it.
That's right.
It's a good strategy.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So the guys, I was sending me just drawing stuff on the papers, taking a picture on WhatsApp, then sending it to me on WhatsApp, and I forwarded it to a couple of people, a few people that will potentially use it, and it was an interesting exercise. And the feedback loop doesn't have to be formal.
No, not in that case. That's all right.
Yeah, and people just tell you, what about this? This I particularly don't like this, or whatever. People are generally open and honest when So you get your. So I spent some time doing that, and then we designed based on the input that we had, we extrapolated the same methodology to have few aspects of the design that we could consider taking it forward, and again we went through the same process of checking in with the users. There was a full-blown MVP prototype that was built, which a clickable prototype that was built for all the functions that the platform has to perform, and it was tested heavily with a whole bunch of users.
Brilliant. The process that you followed, obviously you've been doing this for a while, so you know what process to follow. And this is why I wanted to share your story. You are a technical guy, but you didn't develop this thing. You took it off, you found a business to build it for you, and you went through the process, but you went through a process that that's true, tried and tested. And we want to share what that was. And from the perspective of the design, the working with users, prototyping, you've gone through all the things that get you to a decent quality outcome. So then when you get to build, what happened? Did you have much trouble during build, or were you mostly there during the build process?
Well, look, I mean, if you do your prototypes right, and if you solve your problems at the time of prototyping, I think the build work is so much easier. Notwithstanding, the build work it has its own set of challenges around the functionality to make it work. But the good thing is you already know the solution if there is a problem. So as thinking about this as a person who's trying to build a platform, and building a platform requires a whole bunch of people from various capabilities. And in my particular case, I had two hats. I had a job that I had to do, as well as build this on the weekends and overnight. So that was.
It would have been much harder if you tried to build it yourself.
Yes,
definitely. But project managing it hands-on, you were, weren't you?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, so it is hands-on, and so. It was a lot easier because we had done prototypes early on, and
definitely.
The number of things that prototype did is it educated the team that was going to build. Because if you think about the team that is going to build, a designer doesn't necessarily think about like a developer, and same goes vice versa, right? So and they're all looking at this problem with a different angle. So building together a whole platform as a clickable prototype, which helped educate the team rapidly as well, saying that everybody understood, what is that we're trying to do here, and that ended up becoming their source of truth as they went about doing whatever they had to do on the project.
Yes.
So that was one good thing, and the second thing is obviously validation with the users themselves, and getting feedback and refining that early on. So if these two things are done, I think the build work is a lot easier because you're more focused on the functionality side of things. Is it working as
how to deliver
expected?
it? Yeah, exactly.
That's
and
right.
you're not, and you have less concerns about putting it out there in MVP and people saying, "What the hell is this thing?" Especially if you've been querying it with your prospective users, because that feedback has already happened. And I think. People listening, just think about when you're designing a product that you rather test it early as humanly possible. Like anyone that designs, even if it's a hardware product, they have steps in the process where they have different levels of manufacturing and testing and prototyping. Software is no different. We need that feedback loop along the journey, not just at the end of it. So we've seen so many stories where people just get to the end and deliver a product and say, here, customer, have a look at this. And the customer says, what the hell is this thing? And that's not a place you want to be in. So that slow process will actually speed up and ensure you've got quality product at the end of it, and less stress along the way too, because it keeps it in a nice tight box as to, all right, here's a stepped incremental process, and you don't go and build something unless the prototype's ready or the feedback from the users is to par and what you expect.
It's also, like you said, Raf, earlier, you want to have those problems solved in prototyping or early on rather than as they come up during your development.
Yes. Yeah. Now, would you say the process that you followed, could that be done by someone non-technical?
I think that, testing your idea is not necessarily a technical thing.
Correct.
So essentially what we're doing is we're testing our ideas. And in some cases we're testing the business idea itself. In some cases we're testing the design itself that we're going to create to achieve an outcome. So I don't think it requires technical, but I would say that it's probably worthwhile that if you're considering doing something like this, spend some time with someone who has done this few times. They can definitely lend hand in terms of utilizing the right tools that make it so easy to test your ideas, and that can rapidly be prototyped. Rapid prototyping, I think, is probably the good thing, because it just gives you that extra opportunity to test various things quickly and come to certain conclusions based on those results. I think I recommend people working with someone who has done this before. It definitely helps. But does it have to be that way? I don't think so. If you have time on your side, you can do it by yourself.
Yeah, and I think you have to be open, and it comes down to how you become a manager within the project. Right. So you need to be organized, you need to understand it, and you need to want to dig into detail. That's something I'd advise. If you're not a very detailed orientated person, managing a software project can be very challenging because it is all devil in the detail in this space. So it's just something to think about from my perspective, from the outside looking in. Yes. So Raf, there's three parts to a tech venture that you're basically on the journey of. There's the idea that you flesh out and you evolve. There's the technology that brings the idea to life, but then there's the business side. There's the business model. There's the marketing, the sales, everything on that angle. How are you approaching that side of NextContract, and what are you thinking about there? Do you have partners in the space, or are you evolving it through network? What's your approach to doing that?
There's a range of things that we're doing. So we're very actively working with a number of employers to try and bring them onto the platform. We've managed to bring some of them so far, but we are actively working and promoting as to why they can use this. For employees, I mean, most of these podcasts, I've spoken about contractors because the focus of this has been contractors. But really, the flip side of the same coin is really the employers. So all the processes that the employer needs from the contractor perspective are all already built in. And one of the significant things for the employers is a repetitive nature of contracting, which I've not seen it built in any other platform so far. So the repetitive nature, what I mean by that is, like personally myself, I've worked for the same organizations at different points in time on different projects in the last 10 years. The organization wants me to come back and do more work. When they have more work, they would rather have me because I already know the organization and know the projects versus bringing in somebody brand new. So there is always opportunity for repetitive contracting in the same organization. So again, these features are built in onto the NextContract for employees to take advantage of. So we are actively promoting all these things that we have done for employers, and through cold calling and doing various demos. Within the contract is, we are promoting ourselves through a range of marketing, the social networking sites. We're working with the digital marketing organization who is helping me achieve, ability to reach various markets within Australia. We're also using, the known networks to help promote the platform. But this is a typical catch-22, and I think anybody who's going to try and promote a product, which is a marketplace, it is going to be catch-22 because you need both sides of the coin. So it's a bit tricky, but again, it's something that's been done many times. And we are also going through a similar phase where we're trying to build a set of professional contractors as well as a whole bunch of organizations, and then create that marketplace. So both of those need to evolve for this to become successful aspect.
That is always the challenge in the marketplace, but the reward is so great if you get it right. So the marketplaces are brilliant if you can get the mass using them.
That's right.
If you can't get one side or the other, they're made redundant. So they are challenging. So anyone thinking about marketplace, there are two sides definitely that you need to market to, two different problems you're solving, two completely different objectives, stakeholders. So it is a very challenging place to be in, but also could be rewarding if you get it right.
That's right. Yes.
The chicken and egg problem that everyone always talks about.
Definitely. That's an interesting one. So Raf, just to summarise where we're at, if you were to talk to anyone that's got an idea or a concept and was going on the journey that you've been on to build NextContract, what are 3 tips you would give them as to where to start and what to do now?
For somebody who's got an idea, and the first thing I would say is validate that idea, to validate to a sufficient degree that you're assured by yourself as well as the feedback that is coming from the potential users of that idea, that it is an idea that's going to work. So I would say that's number one. Now, I think the second aspect is to think about, from my experience, is really the partners that you're going to select to work with, and that plays a significant part in any project as things progress. Right at the beginning, they're really, it's all green and it's all, everybody's pumped. But as you go through the project, once you cross your 50%, then you start to see real set of challenges, and the behaviors and attitudes are very, very important at that point in time. And so selecting the right partner who can go the distance with you is another important aspect, unless you're hiring your own team, which is a different story.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, hiring your own team.
So, and the last thing is, obviously, if you are an investor who's building a new platform, you probably should need to have very clear idea of how you're going to take it to the market before you complete the platform itself.
Yeah, I think
it's a critical thing to be clear on how you can get it to the market, how you can get it in front of people,
That's right.
how you can monetize it.
Some great tips there, because it's not just about the idea of the business and how you're going to deliver it. I think it encapsulated all 3 of those in your 3 tips. So I think it's some really good value there. Raf, thanks for joining us on the DevReady Podcast. Really appreciated the chat, diving into what NextContract is, but also your background, your history, and how you've actually built a product and how you went about the journey of building your own platform. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing. And if anyone wants to check out NextContract, they can jump on nextcontract.com.au. And Raf, if anyone wants to contact you, how might they get in contact with yourself?
Well, I think the best place is LinkedIn. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, or you can also send me an email. It's raf.kaluri@gmail.com.
Perfect. And we'll drop, obviously, the post in LinkedIn as we promote it out. So we'll definitely share it out there. Thanks again, Raf. Really appreciate your time.
No worries. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Thanks,
and Anthony. I think the work that you guys are doing with all the startups is just amazing. This is definitely a good platform for startups like myself and others out there to actually come here and talk about the product, and then what you're doing around promoting various products. I think it's fantastic.
Oh, thanks, Raf. Appreciate the feedback.
Hopefully we can help some other startups and they can learn some tips from yourself and approach things the right way.
Definitely. That's the outcome we're trying to drive here. It's just getting people to a point where they deliver a product first time around. That's the objective for us.
Yep. It's definitely a challenging one, I must say.
Definitely. If we solve that problem, I think we're on the right path here. Thanks, Raf. Cheers, mate.
No worries. Thanks, guys.
Bye.